All right, another dimension of our visual interpretation and perception, or organization might be a better way to put it, would be the idea of perceptual constancy. And essentially, we have a tendency to assume certain things. And again, I would again remind you that these things are influenced by top-down processing. So there are certain aspects of this whole thing that are really quite necessary to recognize an object. So essentially, it enables us to see an object as unchanging. In other words, having a consistent shape, size, lightness, color, even as the illumination and retinal images change. So it's seeing an object as unchanging, and even though our eyes may fool us, maybe a better way to put it would be our brain fooling us, because we say, is the color of A here the same as B? And we look at and see it as a lighter color, when in fact, because of the illumination and the of the illumination of that particular area, or I should say the shadowing of that area, we would swear that A and B are not the same color, when in fact they actually are. So perceptual constancy is really the large concept. Under the subdimension of this is what we refer to as color constancy, and this has within it a variety of other subdimensions, but it refers to perceiving familiar objects as having a consistent color, even if changing illumination alters the wavelengths reflected by the object. So we see a color as a result of our brain's computations of light reflected by an object relative to the objects surrounding it. And this would be a good example, is B and A are the same color, but because of this changing wavelength with the shadow cast by the cylinder, we see them as very different. And so color constancy is a good example. Brightness constancy is very similar in concept. So all of these fall in under the same aspect to perceiving an object as having a constant brightness. So constant brightness in spite of the illumination. You can look at an apple, for example, and with less and less illumination, it looks darker and darker, but yet you know that it's a bright green apple, for example, and that would be a good example of brightness. Another one is shape constancy. And shape is, again, perceiving familiar objects as unchanging in shape. You can put underneath this one is size. So when you look at a door open, the first view of that door looks like this, but the next time the door is open, it looks like this. And you know that they are actually the same, but you keep the shape constant, but in spite of the data coming in makes it look very less than rectangular, let's put it that way. So the size constancy is unchanging in size, unchanging in shape, and we instantly and unconsciously infer that object size when we're looking at something and make some certain conclusions. But the thing to keep in mind is how do we do all these things? And a lot of that is experience and learning influence how we learn how these things actually occur. Initially, it would be very fascinating, and in a lot of ways, we still are very fascinated by one big item on our horizon when we have a full moon, is on the horizon versus in the sky, and we look at it on the horizon, and it looks absolutely massive. By the time it gets up in the sky, because of the objects around it, we see that it looks very, very small. Now let's look at visual interpretation. All right, the last stop on our tour through visual perception is visual interpretation. And one of the ways that we actually are able to see how we interpret the world is watching when we can alter the world. And one of the ways that we see that happen is with people that have either had a visual impairment or a visual abnormality, and how they operate and how they manage when their vision is actually restored. And what we see is there seems to be kind of a critical period at which time where we begin to learn the key components of processing the world visually or through a tactile way. So for example, you have someone who has visual impairment, a cataract's very bad, etc., and they learn to operate in the world with their with kinesthetic touch, with touch and kinesthetic. Kinesthetic is movement, touch is obviously touch. But when we restore their vision, they struggle with various components of their visual environment, partly because they didn't really learn how to process the world that way. The other way that we look at it, and I'm going to add in a video for you to watch with this particular video, has to do with perceptual adaptation, and it is pictured here by this guy wearing a helmet that reverses the visual field. So whatever is up is down, whatever is down is up, and he has to process. And the question is how quickly can we adapt to a visual field that is 180 degrees out of phase, okay? And the video that I'm going to show you is a woman who participated in something called the Human Zoo, and she wore a set of goggles that turned the world upside down. She limited all of her input so that when she wasn't sleeping or otherwise doing things that she wasn't going to be using her visual perception, she would wear a face mask. And so we adapt rather quickly. Now in her case, it was, I believe, 8 days that she adapted, and she was able to pour a cup of coffee. She was able to type. She did typing. She did pouring tea, and she managed to figure out just how to do that whole thing. And that was part of the backdrop of adaptation that we looked at, and I'll refer you just to watch that so you can see how that whole thing comes together and how incredibly adaptable we can be when we have perceptual abnormalities.
I'm Tracy Peters, I'm 29 years old and a psychology student at the University of the West of England.
For the next 7 days she'll be wearing glasses that will make her see the world upside down. It's going to be very distorting and debilitating.
Initially I'll be probably totally helpless. I'm not going to be able to answer the phone easily, I'm not going to be able to answer the door easily. Going to the toilet, ridiculous things like shaving your legs. I'm afraid that's not going to be possible without cutting myself unless I get somebody else to do it.
You alright?
Yeah.
Okay. Is everything upside down?
It is. I have to tilt my head to see people's faces. I tend to be looking at groins at the moment. Yeah, it's very bizarre.
Wearing upside-down glasses is a classic experiment in psychology. The aim is to try and understand whether the brain can rewire itself to see the upside-down world the right way up. In the 40s, these Austrian researchers reported that their human guinea pig eventually saw the inverted world as normal. But that's an outcome that's never been proved. Over the next week in our human zoo, Tracy will undergo a battery of tests that will study her perception of the world. They've been designed by psychologist Oliver Braddock.
Some of our tests will be very much oriented to see how she's linking vision and action, and other tests will be more purely related to visual experience.
A team of Tracy's fellow students will be watching her to see if she adapts to her upside-down world.
Well, she's certainly going to get used to it in the sense of feeling much more at home and happy moving around and picking things up. Whether she's going to get used to it in the sense of not finding the visual situation strange is the big question we're trying to answer.
On with the experiment. Day 1.
If I hold my head normally, I can see in front of me leaves and the symmetrical patterns on the floor. I can see the edge, which is good news, and I can see the bottoms of the lampposts. If I lift my head higher, that's when I then get an idea of distance, because now I can see the houses and the trees up ahead. But I have to keep checking where my feet are in relation to where that is to know what the distance is. The glasses are heavy and make my neck ache. I can take them off, but so I don't cheat, I have to wear a blindfold. Day 2. I can't get the hang of a knife and fork, but water looks fantastic. And this sounds weird, but when I go to touch it, it feels like I'm not going to meet my reflection. Day 3, I'm really tired. I slept loads last night. I like to think it's new connections building in my brain. For the first time ever, I momentarily looked at that cup and thought which one's the reflection and which one's the real cup. Certain things are getting easier. Oh, what a lovely cup of tea. It's the end of day 4. Things are going pretty well. I seem to be adapting to certain things. Like I actually wrote my name today, which doesn't sound great to anyone else, but it was a real achievement to me. Typing's getting easier. Walking around's getting easier. Worst thing about going shopping was a down escalator. Up was fine, but going down, everything was just dropping away from me so quickly. It was quite disturbing. I managed one, but I was too scared to do it anymore. Day 5. Been having weird dreams. In the dreams, people come to me that I have met during the day that I do recognise, and they're up the wrong way. I have got used to seeing faces upside down, and I don't think that they're up the right way. I know that I'm seeing them upside down and you're not. But innate objects, say the bowl of flowers that I was painting, I wasn't sure if I was seeing that differently to other people or not.
But has Tracy's world flipped over, as the Austrians reported in the 1940s?
I had no visual sensation of things flipping around. But I wonder whether what he meant was this confusion where your brain is perceiving things are normal, and it doesn't give you this cue that everything's upside down, because there are moments when I think, no, that's not upside down, is it? Is it upside down? And then I tend to ask somebody how they're seeing it, and I wonder if that's what he meant.
Over 7 days in the human zoo, the psychologists have been analysing Tracy's performance.
We've seen her moving around with a lot more confidence, but at the same time there are clearly aspects that haven't adapted or have only adapted very slightly. The skills that she's been practicing involving fine handwork in near space, moving blocks around on the tabletop, that kind of thing, and writing, she seems to have become quite adept at, whereas she was still having a lot of difficulty if there was a larger range of possible positions she was having to deal with, like picking a cube off my hand in various locations. She seems to really be hunting around quite a lot with her hands, even on the last day. if there's one conclusion, I think you've got a lot of separate adaptations going on here. With enough time, enough practice, they might cohere together to give us a unified set of skills in the world. Right, Tracy, this is a big moment. We're ready to return you to the right way up world. Can we take your glasses off?
Yeah. Can I open them?
You can open your eyes. How does it look?
Bright.
Okay. And there's something to celebrate here. Can you open that, and then we're going to go and pour some glasses.
I feel like I've probably had a bottle of this already, actually. God, my leaf. Oh, everything is not quite. It's all moving. Oh, this has been the worst bit. I feel disorientated. I'm getting the motion sickness now instead of before, and I feel drunk.
Drunk and you haven't touched a drop yet?
No, I haven't.